There is another thing that sometimes actors are worried about, and that is I must be different. For example, you are in the live setting and you just hear your competitors, right? And, ooh, he did it like that. That means I shouldn't repeat it like that. I should do it differently. Don't worry about it. Especially if you have the Demidov training, of course, you know it very well. Something takes over and you yield to that something and the rest is history.
Hello, everybody. I'm Nolan Henley. I'm an actor based in New York City and voiceover artist based in New York City, and also a teacher in training with the Demidov Association. And with me is another teacher in training, Kimon Fioretos. Kimon, how is Greece?
Greece is fine. I think we're heading towards winter slowly but surely. And with us is Andrei Malayev-Babel.
Who is in Florida, of all places, waiting for a hurricane to come my way.
So we better get this. We better get this moving.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Well, so today we wanted to talk about, after our last sort of session talking about the hot actor topic of typecasting, we thought we'd move on to another of actors' favorite things in the world, which is auditioning. So, I suppose to get us started, we actually had a question coming in from a student from the 2-year certification course over the summer, and we thought maybe we could start with that question just to get the ball rolling, and then from there we can branch off. So, Kimon, if you wanted to take a look at that question.
Absolutely. These questions came from Jason Smith, and the first one is, what are your thoughts on auditioning, especially for film and TV, specifically regarding the common practice of self-taping, either at a facility or at home?
Self-taping certainly is a game changer, right? Because it's relatively new still, but it's allowing you to prepare, to fine-tune, to find the kind of calm that is probably not going to be as easily obtained when you are in a different auditioning setting, which we will talk about separately. But in my opinion, it's a blessing because of the kind of preparation that you can do and the sanctity of your own creative space. So I think it's the other kind of auditioning that is much more challenging, that obviously we will be talking about, because in addition to self-taping, you also have to go out and audition when you are actually facing your competitors, when you are actually facing the auditors. And it's a completely different experience, of course. So when it comes to self-taping, I think it's an easier way of auditioning. That's my experience. Nolan, you've been doing self-taping. What is your experience?
Yeah, I mean, my blue backdrop behind me kind of gave it away. I think, you know, there's a lot of different elements that go into it. And I think, you know, I think we'll talk about each one of these things, as you mentioned, Andre, because there really is, and the way I'm thinking about it right now, there's kind of 3 types, right? There's in-person auditioning when you're called in. There's in-person auditioning when it's cold and you don't really know anybody in the room.
Right.
And that's kind of like the callback or first audition situation. And then there's self-taping. And I think you're right, Andre. I think there's so much more, you know, there's so much more ability to prepare. There's so much more ability to take your time. But then there's also the added stress of being responsible for so many different quality issues. And so I think actors can do a lot to help themselves in those regards, but I think those are all really technical things.
Okay.
And when it comes down to performance, I think a lot of it is the same. You know, a lot of it is the same, except you get tortured by that possibility of doing something multiple times, which is kind of something I wanted to ask you about in regards to self-taping. There's some actors that talk about a kind of rule of 3 when they go in to do a self-tape, to only do it 3 times, and to then kind of hang their hat up after that. What do you think about that?
I think that the Demidov School, of course, is uniquely preparing you for that, because at the very core of the Demidov School is repetition. Not the Meisner repetition, not to be mistaken with that, right? But repetition, because every etude that you do, you usually get to repeat it. Mm-hmm. Interesting thing happens with Demidovian repetition, because you are not actually repeating anything, but allowing for it to be creative and different every time. You let the material grow, because everything that you did the first time then somehow is incorporated into the second time. And what you did the second time is incorporated into the third time. I don't mean literally, but I mean somehow the experience of having done it for the first time is staying with you because you're working truthfully. And when you are doing this first take, the experience of having done it, it's like a day in the life of the character. You just lived one day in the life of your character. And in our line of work, one day goes for sometimes several weeks or several months or even several years. It's a completely different time. At some point, it would be very tempting to do a podcast on time and space. And how real time and space, the physical time and space, are different from the creative time and space. But because the creative time is different, you actually experience in one take much more than you would experience in a few moments, a few minutes of one's actual life. And so all of that rich experience is then somehow informing the second take. And then that second take and the experience you receive during it is going to inform the third one, which is why when we use the Demidov technique with our film colleagues, and I've done a lot of workshops and also just experience of using Demidov in filming, interesting thing happens. Talking about the rule of three, Nolan. After the third take, the director usually says, that's it, thank you very much, I've got everything I need. Because the third one is so rich, and because also they've got the first and the second one that is giving them a lot of options. All you have to establish is the continuity, because you know cinematic continuity is very important. You wouldn't be able to cut things together if they don't match on the physical level, but that's very easy to assign. But going back to three takes, right? I'm not surprised that some people are experiencing that three is all you need, is that at least if you're working with Demidov, probably it will keep growing, it will keep getting richer, and you will be somewhat satisfied with the third one.
Yeah. I don't want to, jump the gun because I think there's so many different things we want to talk about. But one of the things that immediately I can't help myself but start thinking about, because it's what I want to share with so many people that are struggling with self-tapes, is that success or failure in that regard really, to me, always comes down to calm, to the culture of calm, especially when self-taping. When I see a lot of actors, and sometimes I bring actors into my studio and film them in here. I've also helped actors with their own setups in their own spaces. And once they've got all the lights set up and the camera set up and maybe a microphone, they're already frustrated and they're already tense. And then they bring that into the first take, and then it carries over into the second take and the third take. And that stress and tension comes with them. And then sometimes the worst thing happens when they watch themselves back. They start frustratedly shopping between the takes and saying, well, I want a little bit of that from that one and a little bit of that from that one. And they go and try and kind of Frankenstein that together instead of living through each one of them. And so I just kind of wanted to bring, that word calm into the conversation. I know that opens up a whole world for us. So I hope it wasn't too soon to get us started there, Andre.
No, probably not. I mean, you are talking about the nervousness that comes from doing the setup, and I'm absolutely with you. As I was setting up for this, right, I could get nervous. But now imagine self-taping yourself for an audition. Now multiply that by 10 or 20 or 30, and you will get the live audition. Nervousness, right? So what you're talking about is even more important when it's live. And again, we will talk about live auditions, because look at the circumstances that the actor is in. You're supposed to be in your character's circumstances when you're auditioning for the role. But you must get the part. You must outdo everyone who is around you auditioning for the same role. You must be liked by the auditor. How strong are these circumstances? Needless to say, these circumstances that are connected with auditioning can be so strong that they can completely displace the imaginary circumstances of the character. And instead of being in the character shoes, you find yourself in the shoes of the actor who must score, who must succeed, who must win, who must impress. And the worst place to be is when you are worried about impressing, winning, and so on and so forth. The best auditioning that you've had is when you didn't give a damn. When for some reason you were convinced that you're not going to be picked and something inside of you broke, you kept, feeling very calm suddenly because who cares? I'm not getting it anyway. And because of that, you did the best audition of your life. And because of that, you got the role. Because you did not care. How do you trick yourself into being in the space of not caring, of not giving a damn? That's where that calm comes in. And that's where the Demidovian culture of calm is really indispensable. I agree with you, Nolan. Because you can certainly hope for some kind of a miracle to descend upon you. And that happens every once in a while. Or you could do very particular exercises that catapult you into the space of deep and profound, almost divine calm. And of course, then suddenly everything that is happening with you, the actor, goes far onto the back burner. And everything that is happening with you as the character comes onto the front burner. I remember this situation where once I was doing a one-man show at a university. And in the academic settings, very often they recite your biography before you come out in front of the crowd. And I remember waiting in the green room and hearing the person who was introducing me go over my biography right before I come out, right? But because I was doing something that Demidov introduced me to, and that is doing special breathing and kind of meditation exercises on losing my body, and both of you know what that is, we may have to explain it to some of our listeners, I actually got myself to the point where I was absolutely convinced that the person introducing me was talking about someone else. I did not experience it as being said about me, although all of the facts were of my life, of my biography, but I remember feeling completely removed from it and listening to it as if she was talking of someone else completely, thinking, how interesting, oh yeah, but not at all experiencing it as being told about me. So that's how effective it was. And that is what allowed me to find myself as I stepped out onto the stage in my character shoes and not in the shoes of a person who is trying to impress, who is trying to live up to his own biography, who is trying to nail, who is trying to succeed and win.
Yeah, it's so true, Andre, because no matter how much you train, no matter how much you work, there's some voice inside of you at any audition, whether it be in person or before you're filming, which just kind of goes, well, what do they want and how can I give it to them?
Yeah.
instead of, adopting the circumstances.
The worst thing to worry about is what do they want? What are they looking for? And what is it that they expect from me, right? And how do I adjust my performance? Because that's what's going to put you in your head and actually undermine you. You spoke about cold readings, cold auditions. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think Demidov prepares you even more so for those. Mm-hmm. Because Demidov is so much about not knowing, not intellectualizing, not analyzing, and just going out there. Here is the text. I go, right? Because everybody else being handed something cold is going to immediately worry about making choices, immediately worry about trying to figure out what it's about. And all you have is a little fragment of something. And so by analyzing it, but by perceiving it through your head, rather than immediately going to it with your body, soul, and intuition, you're going to underperform. Again, you're going to undermine your talent. Demidov training, where you are given the text and you're immediately embodying it without thinking about it even for a second. What better preparation for cold auditioning can you think of than that practice that Demidov gives you daily, whether you're doing your individual scales, whether you're doing etudes with the ensemble? You cannot think of better practice than that, because that's what cold auditioning is all about.
And practically, when you see someone auditioning and they have all this homework done on their side,
God.
So much extra stuff to remember. It's so much more complicated than just absorbing that side into you completely.
Yes, and there are people listening to us being horrified, thinking, wait a second, are you telling me that I shouldn't be reading the play? Are you telling me that I shouldn't be analyzing my character? Are you telling me that I shouldn't be, engaged in creating the biography? And the question is complex, of course. And the answer is, how much time have you got? And what are you going to send out first to actually connect with the material? Your head, your intellect, your analytical skills, or your guts, your talent, maybe your genius, your intuition, your all-knowing, all-powerful intuition. It's all about what is the first thing that you unleash, your intellect or your talent or your intuition to connect with the material. Because if it's your intellect that begins to approach the material first, then it will stand in the way of your intuition. And if your intuition is unleashed first, which Demidov allows us to do, then your intellect later on can actually help the process rather than interfering with it. So cold readings, cold auditioning, or situation where the phone rings in the middle of the night, you are needed tomorrow to film a scene because some actor got sick or dropped out, right? And they're calling you urgently. You don't have any time to read the script. You're lucky if they give you your lines ahead of the filming, right? That is a blessing in disguise, actually, because now you don't have any time, and therefore there is no temptation to try to worry about how to do it correctly. Because that's the most horrible thing. What's the right way of doing it? How to do it correctly? What do they want from me? Who knows what they want from me? I'm saving their asses because I'm stepping in at the last second and saving the day, right? What a wonderful, freeing place to be. And that's when your intuition takes over. And that's why your intuition that, of course, read the script, even if you never read it. Sounds like a miracle, but that's how it works. It can take a tiny little fragment of something and recreate the whole out of that little fragment. That's what our intuition does. That's why Demidov talks about synthesis. What I just spoke about is the process of synthesis, of recreating the whole out of a fragment versus taking the whole and cutting it into a bunch of little fragments, which is what analysis does. And of course, our work, the work of Demidov, is the work of synthesis over the analytical techniques that ask you to break your script into bits and pieces, right? Find some kind of intellectual or most active or most theatrical or most whatever actions and tasks behind every bit and so on, which of course ultimately ends up being a purely analytical exercise and therefore stops your intuition from bringing life into your performance and exercising unpredictability, spontaneity, and what we call talent, if not genius.
Yeah.
Andre, before I move
to
Jason's next questions, I wanted to run by you. I found this quote and I'm wondering what you think about it. It's a quote by Philip Seymour Hoffman, and it says,
pretty good actor.
Yeah. And I like how he starts this phrase. He says, auditioning a whole different beast.
Yeah.
It's actually a moment of just throwing down and trying to see what you can bring there because you haven't involved in the character yet. And I'm wondering, are auditions a whole different beast? Meaning, I mean, we know acting, we know how acting works. I mean, you have a full play, you have a film to do, a script or a role, so you have time to kind of involve into something. But are auditions something completely different? Acting.
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yes and no. Because I think what he's talking about is the fact that I just mentioned, that very often you don't see the script, you don't have the whole, you just are given your part, right? And you are yet to do the homework, to do the character work, right? So that's where it's a different beast. It's also a different beast that it's not a performance, right? You're there to get the role, you're there to score, you're there to impress. At least falsely, you can trick yourself into believing that. And where it's not a different beast is that if you can look at audition as an opportunity to perform in front of the audience, they're not auditors, they're audience. You are not actually at all trying to get the role. You are just connecting in this intuitive way with the character, and you are speaking on behalf of the character. And it's all about the character and their life and their situation and their circumstances. If you can trick yourself into doing that, then of course it's not going to be a different beast. And you will be much more effective that way. Because again, the actor's circumstances I must score go onto the back burner, and then the character circumstances come in. And I'm not talking about character circumstances coming in the intellectual way that you have them in your head. I'm talking about circumstances materializing physically. All three of us just came out of teaching a class, right? And we just experienced where certain circumstances materialized in a completely physical way, but when we asked actors about them after the scene, after the etude, they could not immediately consciously speak them, right? Consciously verbalize them. And that is why they were actually so good at embodying the circumstances and being in the circumstances, because consciously they did not know them, right? So that's what I mean, connected with circumstances. Circumstances are there. I don't mean intellectual knowledge of them. I mean their actual physical presence in the space when they begin to affect you. That can only happen when actor circumstances go away, or at least go away as far as they can possibly.
Mm-hmm. Andre, you said it's not about, you can falsely trick yourself into believing that it's about you getting the role. And instead you should guide yourself towards, I'm there to perform.
Yeah.
And it's a good segue because I have a brilliant actor actually agreeing with you, which is Michael Keaton. He talks about auditions. If you guys allow me to play you this clip.
Absolutely. My quick thought, Kimon, is that all brilliant actors agree with each other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
They're not agreeing with me. Okay. They're just all in agreement, because if you are in that league, right, it's a completely different place to be. It's when it comes to other league that you're going to get a lot of different kind of advice. But I'm dying to hear what Michael Keaton has to say.
Okay, so let me allow me to play you this clip.
Mm-hmm.
What I finally figured out about auditioning, and this was big, was I thought, I'm going about this wrong. I'm going about it like that's the job. I have to go get the job. And so I thought, no, I'm going to work. I already got the job. The fact that I got a call to show up in the valley or way down here, and I'm going to get 3 minutes in a room or 20 minutes in a room, whatever they're going to give me in a room, that's the gig. Got the job. I'm going to work today. So I just went, I'm going to work. And I showed up ready to go to work. And then I started to like auditioning. I started, yeah, okay. And it was what getting it or not became, I mean, there were times where you're really, really disappointed because you really want it and thought you got it. I'm not going to lie, but mostly it was like, it's not even the point. The point is go to work, and then tomorrow I'll get another one. I'll go to work tomorrow.
So that was the clip. I think he says exactly what you said.
Yeah, absolutely. Life as usual, right? I'm going to work. Whatever can substitute the dreadful, I must nail it, I must impress, I must outdo, outperform. There is another thing that sometimes actors are worried about, and that is I must be different. For example, you are in the live setting and you just hear your competitors, right? And, ooh, he did it like that. That means I shouldn't repeat it like that. I should do it differently. Don't worry about it. Especially if you have the Demidov training, of course, you know it very well. Something takes over and you yield to that something and the rest is history. That famous Demidovian it. Let it do it, right? And so that it, if you are trained to actually obey it, green light it, surrender to it, it will do the job for you. And it will always be unique, inimitable, spontaneous, unpredictable. And that is, of course, what everybody is waiting for. They might have some idea about what they would like, but if they see a good actor, they're going to think 10, 15, 20 times before they hold on to what it is that they were expecting. If that good actor that they just saw gave them something different, they will adjust their own plans and their own concepts to you if they see a good actor. And a good actor is not someone who is trying to make it right. The good actor is not someone who is trying to precisely deliver or deliver at all. A good actor is someone who yields, who surrenders, and the character takes over and the rest is history. And you cannot do it if you're worried about all of these false tasks that you're supposed to achieve when you're auditioning.
Yeah. I think that that idea of that trying to achieve something, a lot of the young actors I work with, especially when they're auditioning with monologues, which is rarer now to some extent, but certainly when you're auditioning for classic plays, it's still welcomed, that they're looking for this definitive version of this speech. And it really has to do with that compartmentalizing, Andre, and analysis that you brought up earlier. They've already compartmentalized this role, their work on this role, into just this speech. That I go into the room and just try and do this speech instead of this idea of going to work like Kimon in that quote. This idea that I'm bringing my work on this role into the room, and today I'm just doing this speech, but my work really is on the whole of this role, which is actually, I think, another way that the Demidov School uniquely prepares you to audition. We've talked about how etudes do so well for you when it comes to a cold read or when it comes to a side. But I think also the idea of character facilitation and how we kind of organically grow a role is actually really useful when you're doing the same speech, even for a number of years. When I go and get to give a speech, it's almost, I almost feel like a painter who's carrying around a painting with them that they can't stop working on. Yeah. And it feels more like, well, I'm going to let you guys have a peek at this thing that I've been working on, instead of trying to have this definitive sort of moment in the room.
Absolutely. And this connects, of course, Nolan, with our first podcast on transformation, right? We're talking about type and typecasting, and we were basically talking about transformation. But when you are given just one monologue or just one scene, of course, it tricks you into believing that it's all about that and that there is no character, right? Because where is that character? Where is that rest of the play? And yet, of course, if it's a well-written play or a well-written script, that little segment contains in it the entirety of the character. So you can, again, trust that you will transform and you will become character and you will be operating not out of the lines, which I think is what you're talking about, but out of character. But look what happens with actors. When they're given a role, and even if it's a full script, and they're yet to learn who the character is, and they're yet to become the character, what is the first thing that they're beginning to do? They're beginning to decide how they're going to say that line, how they're going to speak this line, where is the emphasis, and so on and so forth. They're worried about completely wrong things, not realizing that if they just continue to trust the character, then the character knows how to speak the lines. And if they prematurely decide or pre-decide how they're going to speak the lines, the character may never burst through that predetermination, because that predetermined way of speaking the lines might actually disallow the character to show up, to even show up. That's why the Demidov's assigning works so well for auditioning. When you are assigning it, just strictly following punctuation and not worrying at all about intonating, about interpretation, about how you're going to speak it, where the operative words are, or stress words, or however they're called. You are just assigning them very blandly, so to speak. Mm-hmm. That's when the character suddenly has ultimate freedom to say these lines the way that they feel like saying them. And that is what's going to make you a good actor. And that's what's going to make you score at this audition.
Andrei, sorry, go ahead.
No, Kimon, please.
As we were moving towards this podcast, I went online and I did a little research, and I saw so many videos of casting directors talking about it. Then I went and I read literature about auditions, and what I found was some of them talk about authenticity, others talk about variety, that's what they're looking for, and some of them, and excuse my French, I mean literally, talk about je ne sais quoi. It's the thing that they don't know what it is, but once they've seen it, they'll know. And I mean, all these things, authenticity, variety, and the I don't know thing, I mean, for me, it sounds so vague when variety. Okay. I don't know how
I'll tell you a story that might make variety a little bit more concrete.
Okay.
I had a student who is now a teacher herself and a respected actor. Her name is Katie Cunningham, and she is on the cover of Becoming an Actor Creator. Yeah, because I was directing her in Ibsen's The Lady from the Sea. And so that's the photo on the cover of Becoming an Actor Creator. But she once shared with me how she got a very important role. She said, well, they invited me and I, read for the role. It was a duo scene with the main character, with the main male character. And later on, they invited me again. I was doing the same scene, but now against a different partner. And then they invited me again, and I again was doing that same scene for them, but against a different partner. And after that happened 3 or 4 times, she figured out she's been cast. They're now casting her partner. And when she spoke with the casting director later on, when the casting director congratulated her on getting the role, the casting director looked at her and said, do you know why we cast you? And she said, no, I have no idea, because you are completely different with every partner. There you go. The right way of doing it, right? Because she was actually Demidov trained, and because she could not be different. Sorry for double negative, right? She had to be different with a different partner, right? Because she was perceiving them and therefore becoming something else with them, from them, under their influence. She could not do anything else. That's what got her the role. If that variety is what you are speaking about, Kimon, then it's actually very concrete and it's a very good variety. So when you're repeating, they're not asking you necessarily to do the same thing, right, that you did last time. They want to see how adaptable you are. They want to see how creative you are, how unpredictable you can be and spontaneous. Nothing wrong with that. Also, being authentic, right, it is, yeah, a little bit vague, just because what exactly do you mean? Authentic to yourself, authentic to character, authentic meaning being actually truthful, authentic meaning being truth-like. You see what I mean? There's difference between being truth-like and acting naturally and actually being truthful. So that's where I absolutely agree with you that yes, absolutely, please define variety and define authenticity, right? What exactly do you mean?
As far as variety, I think from what I read, they were not talking about what you were talking about.
Probably
Full
not.
adjustments. No, they were talking about variety in the monologue, like
Right.
start from some place and go to a different place at the end. So we're talking about
Because,
choices again.
yes, because the greatest enemy of the actor is monotonousness. But we know where monotonousness comes from. It comes from holding, from never letting go, right? In the Demidov School, there is a lot about that. Whereas you said a line, if you don't let go of it, then the next line will come out the same. And if you not let go of the next line, then the line after next will come out the same because you're holding. That's why Demidov has the technique of letting go. I said it, I let go, another breath, and the next line is something else entirely. And that creates variety. You cannot calculate variety because it will be bad variety, right? You cannot concoct, design variety because it's going to be bad variety. But there is something in the Demidov organic technique that actually allows for variety, and it's, of course, the letting go in the moment, and it's, of course, the whole idea that if you forget what you've just done and again give yourself complete freedom in the next take is going to be very different. Now you might say, wait a second, if it's film, and imagine you just gave them 3 completely different takes, what are they going to do with it? They will not be able to slice them together when they're editing the final take. Not true, because these editors are going to love you if you're going to give them 3 takes that have variety in it. What is absolutely non-negotiable is that if you held your glasses in your left hand in this particular take and you held them as close to your face, right, then in the next take you cannot be holding them in your right hand, and they cannot be here. But that has nothing to do with nuances, subtleties, and even qualities that can be different from take to take. So if the director and the editor then want the scene to develop in one direction, they could take it in that direction because you gave them that choice, which wasn't a choice, which is your creative expression. And if they want the scene to go in a different direction, they have that choice from you as well. You see, that variety, of course, is wonderful. And when you're auditioning, if you can demonstrate that you can be different, that you can give them not only variety within the take that we spoke about, but variety in terms of saying the same lines differently, they will only understand that they've got a richer actor before them and will be more tempted to work with you.
That's beautiful, Andre. And for me, it brings out the word organic again, because that's the school we're talking about. Instead of, for instance, where I found talking about variety, they were talking about breaking the scene down, then using fast or slow, then big or small, then for each segment, putting an adjective in. So we're talking about, again, analysis instead of synthesis, in a sense, and breaking it down into small segments and trying to work out of that.
We are talking about something very primitive, ultimately.
Yeah. And also, the more I think about it, it's not fun. That's the real truth. When you're sitting there breaking things down like that, I suppose there is a kind of creativity to it. But I think the thing that becomes disappointing to actors, it is not actually the creativity that is natural to an actor, right?
Unfortunately, Nolan, what you're saying is this. There are a lot of non-actors who have become actors for whom it is unfortunately fun. Those are the people that Stanislavski catered toward. For a bunch of non-actors, essentially, who became actors, and in order to get them anywhere, he had to give them intellectual exercises. According to Demidov, actors and all people ultimately in every profession and every field are divided into 4 types, right? And at the very top of it is affective actor. And it is the technique of the affective actor, passionate actor, intuitive actor that the Demidov has developed. Underneath is emotionally willful actor, who needs to know what am I doing in every beat, and who has some emotionality, but it is far from the powerful emotionality of the affective actor. And then, of course, there is an imitator. And underneath the imitator, there is the intellectual actor, or as I say, a non-actor. They love breaking their scripts into bits and figuring out actions and objectives and tasks and through lines and so on. Why? Because it's an intellectual exercise. Some people will disagree with me and say, it doesn't have to be. Really? Really? It doesn't have to be? Finding a verb? Yes, I suppose you can first experience it and then put a verb to it. But the question is, if you can experience it, why do you need to put a verb to it altogether? You're already an actor.
True. Should I continue with Jason's questions? Because
that would be wonderful, because they're coming from a real actor, from a working actor. Yeah,
exactly. So his second question is, how does one work with the reality of a reader who's not fully engaged in the scene? The reader might not be an actor, might have a script in hand, and may not be fully in the moment. Some are non-acting readers or civilian partners. So what are we to do with that?
Again, Demidov uniquely prepares you for that, because you sometimes are getting a lot from the partner. And sometimes you're getting nothing. And they don't even have to be a reader to give you very little, right? Yeah. There are partners that each of you have worked with that gave you very, very little and were very predictable. And very quickly, you learned exactly what you were getting from them, take after take, or performance after performance. And here you are, you're supposed to be creative, spontaneous, improvisational, alive, and so on and so forth. What do you do? This is where, again, Demidov is giving you such variety of sources from which your impulses are coming from, that the fact that your partner is not actually a very rich source of impulses does not restrict you. Your impulses are coming from your own mobile inner life, from your own vivid imagination, from the audience, from the environment, from the objects, from the props, right? They're coming from every other source. And somehow the fact that your partner is very kind of bland, so to speak, right? Wooden, not creative, predictable, it doesn't matter as much. Sometimes it becomes, well, this is how this character is, right? Not the actor. But that's what happens, because you actually begin to identify the character and the actor. Well, that's how he is, or that's how she is. Tell you another quick anecdote. I had another student who was cast as Christina in The Ghosts. Did I tell you that story?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. And she was working against an older actor who was playing the pastor. And Christina, the maid, has that long scene with the pastor at the very start of The Ghosts. And this actress, being still in Demidov training, she was probably, second year or just finished her first year of training, she was different every scene, every performance. And the older actor once approached her and said, listen, what you're doing is absolutely amazing. I mean, you're never repeating anything. You are so beautiful, creative, and so on. But please, can you stop doing it? I'm forgetting my lines. Right? And she said, no problem. From that standpoint, rather from that point on, she was still improvising and still living it all differently inwardly, while outwardly she kept doing the same thing. The problem is that the actor was still an older person. So during one of the performances, he still forgot his lines. And the blocking was he's on one side of the stage, she's on the other side of the stage. And there's a pause that is growing longer and longer. And it's not like she can help him by prompting him because she's so far away. So our actress, with great ease, gets up, crosses through the whole stage, sits next to the pastor, takes his hand in hers, and begins to stroke it. He gradually comes down and the line appears. So the very same thing that was tripping him actually saved him, because another actor who is not trained in Demidov would not take that freedom to walk across the stage, change the blocking, and sit next to him and very gently, right, calm him down. Peculiar, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful story, though.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let me use another question that Jason has.
Please.
If we do have the time. So he asks, how should one approach an audition situation where they're using dummy sides for a character they can identify? Meaning, what strategy should be used when the audition script doesn't fully match the actual character or scene?
What do you think, Jason, means the audition script doesn't fully match the character or scene?
In my experience,
sometimes-
go ahead, Nolan, please.
Okay. I think, what it is that sometimes when they're, sending out an audition, either they don't want, someone to know anything about the project or what
Right.
role they're being considered for, or exact details, or worst of all, tell someone who doesn't end up getting cast something that's happening at the end of a very important season of television or something like that. So I think sometimes these dummy scripts are scripts sort of written in the style of, and in that way they don't give you all of the information.
None of the scripts is going to give you all the information, right? Because usually you're not going to be given the whole script anyway. And the fact that they're using the dummy script, I think, is even more freeing. Again, it's all a question of, are you prepared in general? Not prepared for this particular role, but just prepared. So this is a difference between the Demidov School and the rest of them that I know of. Because the rest of them are working with particular material and they're teaching you how to master that particular role. Demidov is not working with material, he's working with you, the actor. His subject is your talent, your skill. Do you see what I mean? So think of the etudes where you're basically becoming a different character, given different text and becoming different character 3 times a day, 4 times a day, 5 times a day. If you are preparing like that, then you are uniquely prepared to transform into any character, to master any role. And if you are trained in a different way, when it's all about mastering that particular role, the school of Stanislavski and many other schools that are actually based on the school of Stanislavski, whether they want it or not, it's all about meticulous, laborious, very long process of mastering the role. And once you mastered it and you are given the next role, you have to start everything from the very beginning, because the fact that you mastered this role does not prepare you for the new role in any shape or form. Which is why Demidov, in reaction to that, creates a school that is not actually preparing you to play a particular role and crack it and figure out the way to actually become it, but just allows you and helps you to practice transformability, ability to transform into any character with hardly any notice. Now, if given time, a Demidov actor also has a lot that they can do. Because as you said, Nolan, every time you go back to a particular monologue, even if it's a year from now, 2 years from now, you feel like a painter, like an artist who could continue working on that painting. And we know very well that according to some accounts, it took Leonardo da Vinci 18 years to, I cannot say complete Mona Lisa, because when they took it away from him by force, according to the legend, he considered it to be unfinished. He wanted more time to work on it. Now, needless to say, it explains why there are crowds still gathering around that portrait, which is now hidden from us with bulletproof glass and everything, right? You cannot have the same experience probably of communing with Mona Lisa as you used to be able to, but he considered it unfinished, which means that a Demidov actor, if given time to work on a role, has a lot to accomplish, but they're also equally prepared for what we are talking about today, when it's an audition, when you haven't seen the script, where you don't know exactly what is wanted, right? And you can be free, which is probably the most important thing of all. One day, I'm sure we will have a whole podcast about freedom and the culture of freedom, right? But ultimately, a free actor is an actor who is going to be cast, because it's that freedom that is not only a quality that is so valuable. When you watch somebody who is free, you're having a completely different experience, and that's who you want to cast as the director. But also, it's a way of living on stage or in front of the camera. It's a way of working. It's a completely different, now that is a completely different beast. Yes, yesterday, I wanted to say, last time, Kevin, you played a excerpt about freedom, right?
Yes.
And remind us who was talking about whom in that excerpt.
It was a wonderful actor. I don't have his name right now in front of me, but he was talking about McConaughey and how he realized McConaughey was free because Gilwood, he was in a flight with Al Pacino, and Al Pacino was talking about Gilwood, and he said he's free. And he didn't know what he was talking about until he saw McConaughey. And he said,
absolutely. And how old was Gilwood? By the time he found freedom?
Yeah.
And that's Gilwood. So if Gilwood found freedom in his 70s, so what I say about this is, yes, older actors possess this arresting freedom. Do you have to wait until you're 70 to actually possess it? Or do you want to go with Demidov and find it when you are 20, when you're 30? Old actors ultimately get tired of acting. Sometimes they physically get tired of acting. They're old, they don't have any strength to act. Sometimes they get tired of acting because they've been doing it so many times. They're tired of being afraid, which is what undermines us when we're auditioning. We're afraid. We're not going to get the role. We're not going to impress. We're not going to score, right? So with age, their senses are becoming dull, and they're walking out in front of the audience and they don't care. That's not the way to be free. That's the way to be irreverent. You want reverence. You want to make sure that when you're waiting for your entrance, you still have butterflies. You still have this, feeling that something special is about to happen. But somehow when you walk in front of the audience, they disappear for you as a restricting, intimidating factor, and they become an inspiring factor. Some people have it from birth. Others have to wait to obtain it, to become free in front of the audience. But again, do you want to be even Gilwood, who found it in his 70s? It's a good question, isn't it?
Mhm.
And all the more relevant when you're talking about auditions, a
Yeah.
space where actors find it so much more difficult to be free,
Absolutely.
you know.
Absolutely. But think about it. All of the conditions when you're auditioning actually are perfect for you to be free and anything but free. But you have to have training, you see. Because just as being authentic, right, variety, all of it are words. Freedom, as we also mentioned last time, is also just a word. Everybody uses it. Because somebody sees Gilgut, somebody says, wow, he's free. And everybody talks about freedom. But who else through their training leads you toward freedom from first day to the last day? I don't know anyone except Demidov. Everybody else is talking about freedom, is talking about improvisation, has certain exercises that are improvisational. And next to those exercises has exercises that cancel any ability to improvise as well.
Mhm.
Right? So that's the problem. The problem is that everybody is flirting with freedom, but they're serving so many different masters. And Demidov only serves one master.
Andre, I remember you said once, if you train somebody on the second day to be free, you're already too late.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you waited for it even one day, right, you already, how should I put it? You established your students, your student actors in the wrong habits. You cannot wait even a single day.
What a great place for us to end. I wouldn't be surprised if we ended every podcast talking about transformation and freedom. That's where we're gonna every time we're gonna get
It all comes to
there.
that.
Yeah. Andre, is there anything else you want to say? Any other closing thoughts on auditioning that you're dying to share?
I am encouraging our actors who are listening to this, because I'm assuming these are actors, teachers, although, wow, wouldn't it be wonderful if audiences were also people who just love to enjoy watching film, right, and go to the theater, were also listening to us. But teachers of acting, actors, directors, I am encouraging them to also connect this with the previous podcast on transformation, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because again, it is deeply connected. And not approach auditioning as auditioning, to find a way of approaching it as another opportunity to create in front of audiences, to find ways to transport themselves into the space of deep creative calm. It can be done through certain meditation practices. It doesn't have to be done through Demidov. You absolutely are encouraged to take our master classes and intensives, and obviously audition eventually for the acting certification course and get that training. But even without the Demidov deep relaxation and losing the body technique, all of you probably have some meditative practices that can help you take that edge off, that unnecessary edge off when you're going to the audition, so that the circumstances of the character materialize for you in the moment, not because you're analyzing them, because usually you don't have, thank God, any time to analyze. But if you are surrendering to something that's actually happening to you in the audition, and if you are not tricked by all these false tasks, nailing it, getting it right, then there will be so much more of you there. And therefore, there will be so much more of your character in that audition. And that's what I want to wish upon everyone who is practicing it and who isn't.
Yeah, and who isn't? Thank you, Andre. Thank you, Kimon. And thank you, everybody who's listening. And as always, the classes, the courses, the workshops that Andre was just mentioning, there's more info about those in the description below or wherever you're listening to this. And we will see you all next time. Thank you so much.
See you next time. Thank you.